Now, the other points then are the structure. And obviously, because obviously there are integration of markets internationally and so on, the argument is made, well, today markets are global, provinces are there, therefore we're no longer competitive and so on. In terms of competitiveness of the markets, you've got to look at two issues. One is the primary market, that is the market in which the shares are sold by the corporation, first issuance, and the other one is the secondary market, that is the exchanges and so on. On the primary market, what we see is that in essence, relative to GDP, Canada is one of the markets that has one of the economies that has the largest market cap. And that per se is a very good indicator that our capital markets are serving our country very well. As a matter of fact, the Bank of Canada says so in its reports. When we look at relative to GDP, in the US, the ratio, number of issuance over 96 to 2000 was about 8.6% in Canada, compared to 5.5 in the US. So clearly, our Canadian companies can access the market. The Ontario government is priding itself that 32% of all of the mining financing done worldwide between 2005 and 2009 were done on the TSX. Okay, so you don't do a third of the world market if you're not competitive. Okay, the secondary market is a bit more complicated because, in essence, a lot of the Canadian firms are cross-listed with the US. That is, they're listed in Canada and, let's say, on the New York Stock Exchange. As a matter of fact, of the 100 largest companies in Canada, 65 are on a US exchange. Okay? And what we find is that the trading goes to the US. For a good portion of them, the value of trading in the US is larger than in Canada. Now, the reason for that is basically that the spreads in Canada on the TSX are larger than in the US. They're larger by about 15 basis points. If you make that 15 basis points on the value of trading on the TSX, it is a $1 billion difference in spreads per annum. Guess what? Trade goes where it's cheaper. And that explains to a large extent the issue. The next point is that, yeah, but we don't have a Canadian in international forums. Well, the first point I'll make is that you don't need to be a federal bureaucrat to be a Canadian. That's number one. Number two, there's only 3 countries that have 2 voting members at the IOSCO. The US, China, and Canada. Both Ontario Securities Commission and Quebec Securities have voting rights at the IOSCO. Okay. Both have been systematically either on the executive committee or the technical committee, which is basically where the decisions are made, where the coordination is made. Okay. And Canada is now the chair of the the American Securities Regulation Organization. The issue in terms of influence at the international level doesn't come from the person you delegate there. It comes from the recognition of the quality of our markets, of our regulation. And one of the things we have in Canada that we bring to that equation is a much better understanding of the diversity of situations and how you should have a regulatory framework that adapts and does the objectives in the different contexts. The other point, and I've made it briefly, Canada is the only jurisdiction that has an agreement with the SEC of mutual recognition of the regulatory framework. We have it since 1991. and it has stood the test of time until today with no problems. It would not be there if our quality of securities markets, security regulation was not right. And basically, if you read the reports abroad, and I quote one from the UK, it says, listen, we had a boiler room scam here. We worked with our Canadian regulatory colleagues, and we had a great success. Okay, so it does work internationally. So when none of the arguments work, then they say, well, the last flavor of the month is systemic risk. And systemic risk is what is basically a risk in the financial sector that's going to screw up the real sector of the economy. That's, I put it in a nutshell. The people that know things about it basically say Securities Commission, I have no business in that area. Okay, it's not their job is to make sure that investors are protected and so on and so forth. But it's really a prudential regulations that will prevent the systemic risk. In essence, if you have a small broker in New Brunswick that goes belly up, well, it's not very nice, but it's not going to destroy the whole economy. If you had a Royal Bank that went belly up, we all have a problem. Systemic risk is that. That's what we're talking about. Okay? And basically, all of the major banks, which control basically the largest part of the securities industry, from a prudential point of view, are already regulated by the Feds. Okay? The other one, which presents systemic risk, is the CDS, the clearing agency, because all the trades are cleared there and held there and so on. If that thing went belly up and in trouble, a lot of trouble will have. That is under the authority of the Bank of Canada through the Payment and Settlement Act. It remains with the Securities Commission on what they're doing vis-a-vis the public, but from the risk point of view, they're already under the Fed. And that was done in a very practical way. You didn't have conflicts in court and God knows what, and just the right thing to do. Okay, so in essence, the point here is that when it is important, rational, and so on, it gets done, and you don't need to change everything. And as a matter of fact, it's being done. And in testimonies, Ted Price and Nick LaPan and so on will tell you, why did Canada didn't have the problems that we had in the US? One of the reasons, the answer, very clearly each time, is OSFI had regulatory authority over the capital positions of the banks, including their investment operations. Okay. And because we had only one body doing it, which had a global picture, okay, we avoid a lot of the problems that happen in the US and in other jurisdictions. So from a very pragmatic point of view, the point here is that what the Fed should do better has already been sent to them. And I agree with that. Okay. Where they're not best to do it, we should leave it to the people that are better to do it. So if I go back to the points that been made, and you say true or false, all of them, from a securities point of view, from a empirical evidence point of view, is false. Okay. Now the point is here is that that's the criticism about our system. But we need to ask, what are the costs if we went the other way? Okay. And there are quite a substantial amount of costs. One is a lot of uncertainty because you're going from a body of law that's known to a new one. Okay. For a while, you're going to be fragmenting the regulatory framework in Canada because Alberta, Manitoba, and Quebec said we're not going to participate. Okay. There's nothing provided in the Act as what's going to happen there. Okay. By the way, on systemic risk, although they're putting a lot of noise about it, there ain't nothing in the Act, the proposed federal Act, that deals with that issue. It's all talk, not there.